Welcome to week 3 of the Inclusive Energy Access online course. Last week, we discussed how we can understand energy needs and priorities through inclusive assessments. This week, we'll dive into what happens when you're ready to design a program or energy intervention. This is an exciting moment because it's where all of our preparation pays off with a clear vision of the impact we want to have for women and girls and the role energy will play. It's in this step that we start to consider the details of the intervention, including partnerships, delivery modalities, and specific energy solutions. For most humanitarian practitioners, design happens when you're writing proposals or during program startup. Let's dive in. Theories of change are useful design tools that define long-term goals and then map backwards to identify pathways to achieve those goals. These are often useful first-cut design tools that serve to lay out broad objectives, expected outcomes, and assumptions. For theories of change, we start with the objective and then map backwards. In this lecture, we'll build a theory of change for inclusive energy access in Uganda's Bidi camp, walking through a number of choices humanitarians will face when designing any program. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of designing a program, let's remind ourselves of why an inclusive energy lens is critical to good program design, no matter your sector or starting point. Consider these facts. 1 in 3 women have experienced physical or sexual assault. Women-headed businesses generally have lower access to energy-related services, such as grid electricity, than men. 60% of the globally undernourished are female. These data points remind us that inequalities always exist and that without intentional program design that is gender sensitive, we can unintentionally exacerbate them. For energy interventions, we design programs knowing that gender inequalities and related social norms condition access to and outcomes of energy access, but they can also alleviate inequalities. For example, gender norms can condition who gets priority use of electricity within a household and who is subject to a majority of pollution while cooking. Energy access can reduce drudgery tasks for women and alleviate time burdens associated with women's household labors. So what are the implications for designing energy interventions? We can't think about energy access from a blank slate perspective. Our starting point is inequity and risk of violence for many women and girls. We have a range of options in how ambitious our programs are within this context of inequality. In emergency contexts, we must, at a minimum, do no harm and reach women and other marginalized groups, but we can also aim higher. Where understanding of root causes and expertise to address them exists, humanitarians can challenge social norms and entrenched inequalities, with programs benefiting and even empowering women, girls, and other targeted groups. So what does this look like in practice? A food security program would not want to distribute food without considering fuel and risk to women and children, who may be exposed to GBV while gathering fuel. This is a do no harm approach. But the same program could also consider shifting norms around GBV, with communication and behavior change activities that address the systemic beliefs and social norms that enable high prevalence of GBV. Pictured here is a photo from an anti-GBV campaign aimed at men in the UK. Regardless of your sector or organization, designing programs will always present you with opportunities to address inequities and safety concerns. This week will prepare you to make intentional decisions about how to address those inequities in your program design. In addition to designing for inclusivity, we also want to design for effectiveness, meaning that we make the best use of available resources and aim for the longest lasting impact. Balancing these two goals is not always easy, especially in humanitarian programs, where timelines are short and funding never matches needs. This is why your choices during program design are critical. This week, ending the Inclusive Energy Access Handbook, we lay out a menu of options and choices for practitioners, including a menu of energy solutions, so what energy service is delivered, and the delivery modalities you can use to deliver and support specific energy solutions, or how that energy service is delivered. We won't get into detail on those right now, but please visit the course modules that introduce these topics in depth. Pause for a second and think about how your organization usually operates. Is there a default way of doing things that you're most experienced with? For example, are you part of a well-oiled machine for distributing lighting, food, or fuel, or setting up medical facilities? We find that many agencies have a familiarity bias, resorting to programming models they're familiar with and know how to do well. This makes sense, since it takes time to build skills and expertise in a single area. But in general, the humanitarian sector has long over-relied on humanitarian-led distribution models versus other available delivery modalities. We'll take a minute to explore that bias and market-based programs, which tend to be less common and an underused approach to program delivery. Pause for a second and think about how your organization usually operates. Is there a default way of doing things that you're most experienced with? For example, are you part of a well-oiled machine for distributing lighting, food, or fuel, or setting up medical facilities? We find that many agencies have a familiarity bias, resorting to programming models they're familiar with and know how to do well. This makes sense since it takes time to build skills and expertise in a single area. But in general, the humanitarian sector has long over-relied on humanitarian-led distribution models versus other available delivery modalities. We'll take a minute to explore that bias and market-based programs, which tend to be less common and an underused approach to program delivery, and can be excellent tools to increase impact in energy programming. Comparing different delivery modalities and making an intentional choice around program design based on opportunities and risk is called response analysis. Our goal in this process is to evaluate a full range of options rather than defaulting to a program design we might just know well or be familiar with, and to ensure that community preferences, perspectives, and needs are at the center of our decision. Market-based and distribution-based programs both have advantages. For example, distributions can be quicker to start up, whereas market-based approaches can provide more dignity and flexibility for community members. But they rely on two different mindsets. While both start by asking about needs, distribution mindsets tend to envision the humanitarian actor as the actor best suited to deliver on those needs. Market-based approaches thinks about local markets and systems and how to support existing actors that will continue to operate in communities long after international aid programs come to an end. Let's return to Uganda's Bidi refugee settlement, which we introduced in week 1, to show how a response analysis was used to design a lighting intervention. In energy and GBV assessments conducted by Mercy Corps, lighting was identified as a priority among host and refugee men, women, boys, and girls. Lighting was also linked to safety, as traveling to collect water, wood fuel, and to attend school in the dark were associated with threat of physical and sexual assault among boys, girls, and women. A distribution mindset may have pointed us directly towards designing an intervention where Mercy Corps distributed lighting products. But with a market-based approach, Mercy Corps conducted an assessment of the local market system, finding that at a national and regional level, a sophisticated network of solar lighting retailers were available and could be incentivized to deliver lighting goods within the settlements. This would mean that high-quality solar goods could be available to Bidi residents, even after the humanitarian program ended, and that female entrepreneurs might have an opportunity to earn income as solar product retailers. The market assessment also identified different consumer segments, their ability to pay, product preferences, and the overall potential market size. With both needs and market information in hand, Mercy Corps realized that by working through solar distributors and retailers, we could have a much wider reach with the potential for long-term impact. This graphic shows the different program delivery options based on the scale of the number of people you intend to reach. Our team ended up pursuing a program model resembling option 3. The theory of change for this intervention Starting with the impact objective was to improve safety, meeting lighting needs, and improve economic opportunity for females in Bidi through access to demand-driven solar lighting solutions. The outcomes were 2 solar operators established distribution operations in Bidi and youth and female-led solar retailer networks deliver new income sources for females. The outputs were the number of solar units sold, disaggregated by displacement, status, profession, and sex, and investments and actions by solar providers to establish market presence and settlements. And the inputs or activities needed to achieve our goal was to vet and establish partnerships with solar firms, female-focused marketing campaign and solar sale events, and a subsidy rollout. Designing this program with careful needs and market assessment data allowed us to cater the program to the needs of the most marginalized women in Bidi, while also reaching, including, and leveraging the wider community. This week's course includes a video that introduces this program in Uganda in more detail and shares early results. We also included the entire suite of assessment tools in the Inclusive Energy Access Handbook. We hope you'll take a look, borrow, transform, and use those tools in your own context. So to sum up your 2 main responsibilities when designing humanitarian programs for inclusive energy access, they are, first, to keep in mind that you'll always be designing and implementing programs in the midst of inequalities and power imbalances. It's your responsibility to understand what they are, not exacerbate them, and work to level the playing field using energy whenever possible. Your second responsibility as a program designer is to make the most out of limited resources by being intentional about your program design, finding opportunities to strengthen and work through local systems. Response analysis is a tool to help you out of your program biases. We look forward to hearing from you this week about your successes and challenges in program design and how you can use these tips in your daily work.